My name is Anna, and I am 32 years old. 2 years ago, my mother looked across her polished mahogany dining table and said, "He made a mistake. He is family. You need to let this go." She was asking me to forgive my older brother David for stealing my identity and taking out an $85,000 loan in my name. I smiled. I nodded. I let them think I was the same compliant daughter I had always been. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick stamped folder, and dropped an official police report for felony fraud right next to her floral centerpiece. My mother stopped talking. The color left her face. My father stared at the document, stood up, and left the room without a single word of defense. The alliance of the perfect family broke in less than 10 seconds. Before I tell you exactly what was on page 4 of that report that made my father walk out on his own golden child, please take a moment to like and subscribe to Hazel Tells Stories. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I love knowing where you are listening from. Now let me take you back 2 years to a sterile leasing office in Oakland the day my quiet life unraveled. I am sitting across from a leasing agent named Marcus. It is a Tuesday afternoon. I just received a promotion at the hospital where I work as a clinical trial coordinator, and I am finally upgrading from a cramped studio to a proper one-bedroom apartment. I make good money. I pay my bills early. I have spent my entire adult life maintaining a pristine 780 credit score. Marcus types on his keyboard. He clicks his mouse. Then he stops. He looks at his screen, looks at me, and his face shifts. It is the specific kind of pity people reserve for someone who is about to receive bad news. Marcus prints a single page and slides it across the desk face down. He clears his throat and says, "I am sorry, Anna, but we cannot approve your application. Your credit score is 480. The air leaves the room. I turn the paper over. Staring back at me is a bold black number, 480. Below it is a flag for a severe delinquency. An $85,000 small business loan taken out 12 months ago. It has been in default for 8 months. I do not run a small business. I coordinate medical trials." My hands start to shake. I tell Marcus there is a mistake, a system error. I take my phone out and dial the fraud department of the bank listed on the report right there in the lobby. I sit on hold for 40 minutes. When a representative finally answers, I verify my social security number, my date of birth, and my address. The representative confirms the loan was verified and signed electronically. I ask her to read the contact email associated with the account. She reads it aloud. davidporterventures@gmail.com. David is my older brother. He is 35. He lives in Marin County, drives a new Tesla, and calls himself a Silicon Valley visionary. He also happens to be the child my parents worship, sitting in that gray office chair staring at a piece of paper that says, "My financial future is ruined. The pieces fall together." My brother did not just borrow my identity. He took it, spent it, and left me with the wreckage. I do not cry. I stand up, thank Marcus for his time, and walk out to my car. I put the keys in the ignition, but I do not drive back to the hospital. I merge onto the highway and point my car north toward the Napa Valley. It is time to have a conversation with my family. The drive from Oakland to the Napa Valley takes an hour and 15 minutes. I spend every second of that drive gripping the steering wheel of my aging Honda Civic, listening to the transmission whine each time I merge into a passing lane. It is a harsh contrast to the destination waiting at the end of the highway. My parents live in a $2.4 million estate surrounded by rolling vineyards and manicured oak trees. They retired early. They host wine tastings on the weekends. They project an image of effortless success. I turn onto their long gravel driveway. The stones crunch beneath my tires, announcing my arrival. I do not bother ringing the front doorbell. I know their afternoon routine. I walk straight around the side of the house, unlatching the cedar gate that leads to the backyard pool. The air smells of expensive sunscreen and chlorine. My brother David is stretched out on a teak lounger under a large canvas umbrella. He is wearing designer swim trunks and tapping on his phone. A few feet away on the wooden deck, his wife Jessica is moving through a slow yoga routine. She is a Marin County fitness instructor, oblivious and deeply insulated from anything unpleasant. I walk to the edge of the pool. My shadow falls across David. He squints up at me, lowering his phone. He does not look guilty. He looks inconvenienced. $85,000, I say. My voice is steady, but my hands are curled into fists at my sides. David sighs. It is the kind of heavy, put-upon sigh you might give a server who brought you the wrong drink. He glances over at Jessica, who is balancing on one leg, eyes closed. "Keep your voice down," David whispers, standing up and grabbing a towel. He gestures toward the far end of the patio, moving away from his wife. I follow him. "You stole my identity," I say, refusing to lower my volume. "You took out a commercial loan in my name and let it go into default. My credit is ruined. I cannot even rent an apartment." David crosses his arms. He looks out over the vineyard, avoiding my eyes. "It was not stealing," he says. "It was bridge capital. My tech startup was on the verge of securing a major funding round. I just needed cash to cover server space and developer fees for 3 months. I planned to pay it off before you ever saw a statement." I stare at him. The sheer audacity of his logic makes my stomach turn. Bridge capital. He uses corporate jargon to sanitize a federal crime. "How did you even get my social security number?" I ask. David runs a hand through his hair. "I remembered Mom and Dad kept copies of our old tax returns in the home office. My own credit was tapped out. I memorized your number from an old W-2 form they had in the filing cabinet. It was supposed to be temporary, Anna." Before I can respond to the reality of his premeditation, the sliding glass door opens. My parents step out onto the patio. My father, Thomas, walks ahead. He is a retired corporate consultant, a man who views every human interaction as a negotiation he must win. My mother, Brenda, follows closely behind him, already wearing an expression of practiced concern. "What is all this shouting?" Thomas asks, walking toward us with his hands in the pockets of his linen trousers. "Your son committed felony wire fraud," I tell him. I expect my father to show shock. I expect him to turn to David and demand an explanation. Instead, Thomas simply frowns at me. "Let us lower the temperature here," Thomas says. His voice is calm, authoritative, and designed to make me feel hysterical for stating a fact. "David already told us about the financial hurdle his company hit. We are aware of the situation." The ground seems to tilt beneath my feet. They knew. They knew my credit was being destroyed, and they said nothing. Brenda steps forward. She walks over to an outdoor bar cart, picks up a chilled bottle of Chardonnay, and begins pouring a glass. Her movements are slow and deliberate, a performance of domestic tranquility meant to override the reality of what her son has done. "Anna, honey," Brenda says, handing the glass to David before pouring one for herself. "He made a mistake. He is under a lot of pressure with this new business. You do not understand how stressful it is to be an entrepreneur." I am looking at my mother, trying to reconcile the words coming out of her mouth. She is standing on a patio that costs more than I make in a decade, defending a man who stole my future to fund a fantasy. "He did not make a mistake," I say, gripping the edge of a patio chair to keep my hands from shaking. "Spilling a drink is a mistake. Forging my signature on a loan application is a crime. The bank is going to send this to a collection agency. I could lose my security clearance at the hospital." Thomas steps between David and me. He uses his physical presence to block my view of my brother. "This is exactly why we need to handle this internally," Thomas says. "If you report this to the fraud department, it launches a criminal investigation. It will ruin his career. It will destroy his marriage to Jessica. You would be choosing to tear this family apart over a temporary cash flow problem." Notice the pivot. The burden of destruction is suddenly placed on me. If David goes to prison, it is not because he broke the law. It is because I reported him. This is the mechanism my family has used my entire life. David acts and I am expected to absorb the impact. Brenda walks over to me. She places a cool hand on my arm. Her eyes are wide and pleading. "He is your brother," she says. "He is family. Do not ruin his life over money. We will pay you back. We will cover the monthly minimums until his funding comes through. Nobody has to lose everything today." Thomas does not wait for me to process her words. He pulls a folded document from his pocket. He has already prepared for this conversation. He unfolds the paper and smooths it out on the glass patio table. "This is a promissory note," Thomas explains, tapping a silver pen against the paper. "It retroactively states that you agreed to lend David the $85,000. If the bank ever audits the signature, this document proves it was a consensual family loan. It protects him, and it guarantees you get repaid by us." I look down at the paper. It is a legal trap masquerading as a compromise. If I sign it, I legitimize the fraud. I surrender my right to dispute the debt. I take the burden of the $85,000 onto my own shoulders permanently. I look at my brother. David is sipping his wine, watching me with an expression of mild boredom. He is not sorry. He is just waiting for me to yield. I look at my father, whose face is set in stone, demanding compliance. I look at my mother, who is using every ounce of her maternal influence to make me feel like the villain. 30 years of conditioning rise to the surface. For 3 decades, I have been taught that my anger is disruptive. I have been taught that keeping the peace is more important than telling the truth. The pressure in the air is suffocating. I am standing alone against 3 people who have already decided my future does not matter as much as David's pride. If I sign this, I say, my voice tight and thin, you promise to make the payments. Every single month. "You have my word," Thomas says, handing me the pen. I take the pen. My hand hovers over the signature line. A small voice in the back of my mind begs me to drop the pen, walk away, and call the police. But the weight of their combined stares pushes me down. I press the tip of the ink to the paper and sign my name. Thomas immediately slides the paper away, folding it back into his pocket. The tension on the patio evaporates. Brenda smiles brightly and takes a sip of her wine. David turns his back to me and walks back to his lounge chair, picking up his phone as if nothing happened. I stand there for a moment, realizing no one is going to offer an apology. The transaction is complete. The scapegoat has accepted the burden. I turn around and walk back down the gravel driveway to my aging car. I sit in the driver's seat and stare at the steering wheel. I have just locked myself in a financial cage, trusting the word of people who have never truly valued me. I turn the key in the ignition. The engine sputters before catching. As I drive back down the highway toward my cramped apartment, I tell myself it will only be for a few months. I tell myself my parents will honor the deal. It is a lie I need to believe just to get through the night, unaware that the real nightmare is only just beginning. It takes exactly 24 months for a person to realize they are drowning, while everyone else in their family is relaxing on a yacht. Let me paint a clear picture of what those 2 years looked like. I am 32 years old. I coordinate complex oncology trials at one of the top hospitals in the San Francisco Bay Area. I handle critical patient data and manage million-dollar research budgets every single day. Yet every night I drive my failing 2014 Honda Civic back to a cramped 400-square-foot studio apartment in Oakland. I share this tiny space with a 23-year-old graduate student named Chloe because I can no longer afford a lease on my own. My ruined credit score is a permanent anchor tying me to the bottom of the bay. I sleep on a twin bed pushed against a radiator. I eat instant noodles on Thursdays before my paycheck clears. I work 60-hour weeks just to keep my head above water. Then there is David. My social media feed is a curated gallery of my older brother living the life I am secretly financing. 3 months after I signed that coerced promissory note on my parents' patio, David posts a photo of a brand new Tesla Model Y parked in his wide Marin County driveway. The caption reads, "Hard work always pays off." 6 months later, his wife Jessica posts a photo from a luxury resort in Cabo San Lucas. They are holding expensive margaritas by an infinity pool overlooking the ocean. She uses the hashtag #EntrepreneurLife. I sit on my thrifted couch wearing scrubs that smell like hospital-grade disinfectant, staring at their vacation photos on my cracked phone screen. David is not building a tech empire. He is building an illusion. He is using my stolen identity to subsidize his production costs, and my parents are the executive producers holding the camera. The financial arrangement with my father decays exactly the way a rotten foundation settles. It happens slowly at first and then all at once. For the first 3 months, Thomas transfers the exact minimum payment into my checking account on the 1st of the month. On the 4th month, the funds arrive on the 12th. On the 5th month, the transfer is short by $200. When I call my father to ask about the discrepancy, he sighs heavily into the receiver. He sounds exhausted by my insistence on basic math. "The market took a dive, Anna," he says. "Things are a bit tight right now with our portfolio. You need to float the difference this month." Floating the difference means skipping my own utility bill to cover his son's commercial loan payment. I do it because I am terrified of the bank suing me. 2 months later, my parents miss the payment entirely. The math alone is a nightmare. An $85,000 commercial loan in default carries a brutal interest rate of 19%. Even when my parents manage to send a partial payment, it barely covers the interest. The principal balance does not shrink. It actually grows. I am trapped in a financial sinkhole, and the people holding the rope are complaining about rope burn. Let us look at Jessica for a moment. My sister-in-law teaches hot yoga 3 days a week and spends the rest of her time curating a flawless athletic aesthetic online. She truly believes David is a genius. She does not know her organic grocery delivery and her designer athletic wear are being funded by her sister-in-law's destroyed credit. She just thinks her husband is a magnificent provider. My parents protect Jessica from the truth because they want David to look like a hero in his own home. They protect his ego at the direct cost of my sanity. The consequences of their negligence do not care about family promises. The bank flags the account again. The debt is sold to collections. The phone calls start. They do not just call my personal cell phone, they call the hospital. I am standing at the nurse's station reviewing patient charts for an experimental drug trial when the main desk phone rings. The charge nurse hands it to me looking confused. A man with a flat, ruthless voice asks for Anna Porter. He reads my social security number aloud over the open line. He tells me I owe $89,000 due to accumulated interest and threatens wage garnishment. My coworkers are standing less than 3 feet away. My face burns hot with shame. I excuse myself to a medical supply closet and stand among boxes of saline solution gripping the phone. I try to explain that my family is handling the debt. The collector laughs a dry, humorless sound. He tells me the bank does not care about my family, they only care about my signature. That night, I call my mother. I am sitting in my Honda Civic in the hospital parking garage listening to the transmission clunk as the engine idles. I tell Brenda about the collection agency calling my workplace. I tell her I need to finance a reliable used vehicle because my mechanic says my transmission is failing rapidly. I tell her I cannot get an auto loan because my credit is toxic. I am waiting for her to apologize. I am waiting for her to panic and say they will wire the funds immediately. Instead, Brenda uses the exact tactic she has refined over 3 decades of raising us. She sighs. It is a long theatrical exhale designed to make me feel small and burdensome. "Anna, your brother is under so much pressure right now," she says. "His app is entering a crucial testing phase. He is barely sleeping. Do you know how hard it is for him to keep everything afloat?" I stare at the concrete wall of the parking garage. I ask her about my pressure. I ask her about my life. Brenda lowers her voice, dropping into a tone of deep maternal disappointment. "We are doing the best we can," she says. "Why are you being so selfish?" Selfish. The word lands like a stone on glass. I am living with a roommate a decade younger than me. I am fielding calls from ruthless debt collectors at a prestigious hospital. I am driving a vehicle that might break down on the Bay Bridge any day. I am doing all of it to protect a 35-year-old man who is drinking premium tequila in Mexico. Then the French bulldog incident happens. During the 18th month of this nightmare, my mother calls me sounding ecstatic. She tells me she and my father just adopted a purebred French bulldog puppy named Winston. She talks for 20 minutes about the specialized breeder, the imported lineage, and the raw food diet they prepare for him. I know exactly how much a dog like that costs. At least $4,000. Later that same week, my father sends his monthly transfer for the loan. It is $600 short. He texts me a brief message. "Unexpected expenses this week, kiddo. Keep things steady for us. I look at his text message and then I look at a picture my mother just posted online of Winston the puppy wearing a cashmere dog sweater. My parents found $4,000 for a designer pet, but they cannot find the funds to keep my name out of collections. Something changes inside me during that week. The desperate grief of a daughter wanting her parents to love her equally evaporates. It burns away completely, leaving something cold and sharp in its place. The realization hits me that my parents do not just prefer David. They view me as a utility. I am a shock absorber designed to take the impact of his failures so he never has to feel them. I stop arguing with Brenda. When she calls to make excuses, I give her short, polite answers. I tell her I understand. I become a gray rock. They assume I have finally accepted my place in the family hierarchy. They relax. They stop worrying about me causing a scene. They do not realize I am no longer a participant in their family drama. I have become a quiet observer. Every time my debit card is declined for groceries, I record the date. Every time Jessica posts a new workout video from her private home studio, I save the image. I am building a mental ledger of every slight, every lie, every manipulation. Work becomes my sanctuary, but even that is tainted by the background radiation of financial ruin. I overcompensate by coming in early and leaving late, checking my trial data 3 times. My boss praises my fierce dedication. She has no idea my dedication is fueled by a desperate need to keep my job because I am one missed paycheck away from eviction. The dichotomy of my existence is jarring. By day, I manage massive clinical budgets with ultimate precision. By night, I count quarters for the laundromat because my brother needed bridge capital. I am done playing by their rules. I am just waiting for the final push. The one insult that will give me the permission I need to stop being the good daughter and start being the architect of my own justice. That push arrives on a rainy Tuesday in the form of a major repair bill and a birthday dinner invitation. The breaking point arrives on a Tuesday in late November. An atmospheric river has stalled over the San Francisco Bay Area, turning the sky the color of wet iron and flooding the highways. I am driving home from a grueling 14-hour shift at the oncology ward. Traffic on the lower deck of the Bay Bridge is a crawling, miserable line of red brake lights. The transmission in my 2014 Honda Civic has been threatening to fail for 6 months. It is a repair I kept postponing because every spare dollar I earned was being swallowed by the commercial debt my brother created. Today, the car decides it has given all it can give. Halfway across the bridge, the vehicle shudders. A loud metallic grinding noise reverberates through the floorboards. The dashboard illuminates with every warning light installed by the manufacturer. The engine revs, but the wheels lose all power. I manage to coast the dying vehicle onto the narrow, rain-slicked shoulder just as the engine seizes entirely. Commuters honk their horns as they swerve around me, their tires kicking up sheets of dirty water against my windows. I sit in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, shivering in my thin hospital scrubs, waiting for a tow truck I cannot afford. The tow driver charges $200 just to attach the chains. We haul the dead sedan across the bridge to a damp, poorly lit garage in West Oakland. The mechanic is a tired-looking man who smells of stale coffee and heavy grease. He puts the car on a lift, inspects the undercarriage for 10 minutes, and returns to the waiting area, wiping his hands on a rag. He delivers the math without any sugarcoating. The transmission is shattered. A rebuilt replacement will cost $3,000, not including taxes and environmental fees. I ask him if the shop offers a payment plan. He points a grease-stained finger toward a third-party financing brochure on the counter. I do not even bother picking it up. A credit score of 480 will not approve me for a toaster oven, let alone a $3,000 automotive repair. My financial identity is toxic. I pay his diagnostic fee with my debit card, checking my bank app to ensure the $75 charge will not bounce. It leaves me with exactly $42 to my name until Friday. I step out from the overhang of the garage into the pouring rain. My scrubs are instantly soaked, clinging to my skin like wet paper. I pull my phone from my pocket, shielding the screen with my hand, and dial my father. Thomas answers on the 4th ring. The background noise on his end of the line paints an immediate picture. I hear the clinking of crystal glassware. I hear the low, elegant hum of classical music. I hear my mother issuing sharp instructions to someone about floral arrangements. "What is it, Anna?" my father asks. His tone is clipped, rushed. I tell him everything. I tell him the car died on the bridge. I tell him about the $3,000 repair bill I cannot finance because of the loan default. I tell him I am standing in the rain in West Oakland, soaking wet, and I need him to drive down from Napa to pick me up so I can figure out how to get to work tomorrow. It is a 45-minute drive down the highway for him. Thomas sighs. It is the same heavy sigh he gives when a waiter forgets his side order. "Anna, the timing on this is terrible," he says. "We are up to our necks getting ready for David. Tonight is his 35th birthday. I blink rain out of my eyes. I know it is his birthday. I also know I am stranded in a dangerous neighborhood. Dad, I have no car and $40 in my checking account. I just need a ride home." "You will have to call a cab," Thomas says, his voice taking on that firm corporate edge he uses to shut down negotiations. "We have a reservation at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Yountville in 2 hours. We are hosting David and Jessica, and your mother is already stressed about the seating arrangements. I simply do not have the time to drive down to Oakland and play taxi right now." I remind him that a ride share back to my apartment will cost $60 during this storm, which is more money than I possess. "Put it on a credit card, Anna. Be an adult and manage the situation. I have to go." The line goes dead. I stare at the dark screen of my phone, the rain washing over my hands. "Put it on a credit card." The cruel irony of his instruction hangs in the cold air. I have no credit cards. His son made sure of that. I walk 3 blocks to the nearest public transit stop. The bus ride back to my apartment takes 2 agonizing hours. I sit near the back doors, shivering uncontrollably, my wet scrubs freezing against the hard plastic seat. I watch the city lights blur through the water-streaked windows. This is the physical manifestation of my role in the Porter family. I am left to freeze in the dark so my brother can eat a curated tasting menu under warm, expensive lighting. 4 days later, the weekend arrives. I am sitting at my tiny kitchen table using a yellow highlighter to map out bus routes so I can commute to the hospital for my Sunday shift. I open my laptop to check my work email and make the critical mistake of opening a social media tab. Jessica has uploaded a new photo album. There are 72 high-resolution images documenting David's birthday dinner in Yountville. I click through the pictures. I see the pristine white tablecloths. I see the sommelier pouring an exclusive vintage wine. I see David smiling, looking robust and untroubled, raising a glass to the camera. Then I reach the centerpiece of the album. It is a series of photos documenting the moment my parents presented David with his birthday gift. It is a vintage luxury timepiece, a highly sought-after watch with a leather strap and a gold bezel. I know enough about the brand to know that particular model retails for no less than $10,000 on the secondary market. There is a close-up photo of David wearing the watch on his wrist, resting his hand on the table. My mother is standing behind him, her hands resting proudly on his shoulders, beaming with unadulterated joy. My father is seated next to him, raising his wineglass in a toast. I scroll down to read the caption Jessica typed below the image. "Thank you to Thomas and Brenda for the incredible gift. To our visionary David who makes us prouder every day. Happy 35th, prouder every day." I stop breathing. I do not throw my phone. I do not scream. I do not break into tears. Instead, a profound and terrifying silence settles over my mind. The physiological response is not a fiery explosion of rage. It is a severe drop in temperature. My pulse slows down. The lingering fog of daughterly guilt, the endless desire to prove my worth to these people vanishes entirely. Looking at the $10,000 watch on the wrist of the man who ruined my life, purchased by the parents who left me stranded in the rain, I finally understand the math of my family. They do not just favor David, they actively require my subjugation to fund his lifestyle. I am not a daughter to Thomas and Brenda. I am an expendable resource. As long as I play the role of the silent shock absorber, they get to maintain their fantasy. They get to buy vintage watches and dine in Yountville, without facing the reality of their son's failures. My suffering is the currency they use to purchase their peace of mind. The era of playing the understanding daughter ends right there at that small kitchen table. I close the social media tab. The tears are gone, replaced by a cold, methodical clarity. The quiet observer steps aside and the tactician takes the wheel. I open a new browser window. I type in the web address for the commercial bank holding the fraudulent loan. I enter the login credentials I was forced to create when the debt went into collections. I bypass the payment portal and navigate directly to the document archive. I create a new folder on my desktop. I name it The Ledger. I click on the first link. It is the original loan application. I download the PDF. I save it to the folder. I click on the second link, the coerced promissory note my father handed me on the patio. I download it. I save it. I open the historical statements. I download all 24 months of records. I scour the documents for metadata. I find the original IP address logged when the electronic signature was applied to the fraudulent application. I screenshot the digital footprint. Then I find the most crucial piece of the puzzle, the wire transfer receipt. It shows exactly where the bank sent the $85,000 after the loan was approved. I zoom in on the routing number and the receiving account information. I download the transfer record. I drop it into the folder. I have stopped asking for apologies. I am gathering ammunition. I close the laptop, the blue light reflecting off my face in the quiet apartment. They told me to manage the situation. That is exactly what I'm going to do. The morning after I download the bank records, I change the rules of engagement. I stop asking my parents for the monthly payments. When the first of the month arrives and my father misses the deposit, I do not call him. I do not send a text message reminding him of the promise he made on the patio. I let the silence hang. 2 days later, Brenda calls me. She expects a fight. She expects me to demand the money so she can deploy her usual arsenal of guilt and excuses regarding my brother and his stressful life. Instead, I answer the phone and talk about the weather. I tell her my shift at the hospital was fine. I use a psychological tactic known as gray rocking. I become the most boring and unreactive person on the planet. I give her no emotion to feed on. Brenda is disarmed by my flat tone. She assumes I have finally surrendered to my fate. She mentions David is doing well with his new project, and I simply say that is nice. The family relaxes. The crisis in their minds is averted. They think the scapegoat has returned to her designated pen. While they are busy congratulating themselves on securing my compliance, I make my next move. I have a small mutual fund. It is an account my maternal grandmother set up for me when I was a teenager, funded with a few $1,000s she saved from her own pension. My parents never knew about it, because my grandmother knew them well enough to set it up quietly. Over the years, the interest compounded. It is not enough to pay off an $85,000 commercial debt, but it is enough to fund a war. I liquidate the entire account on a Thursday afternoon. The cash hits my checking account 48 hours later. I do not use it to fix the shattered transmission on my Honda Civic. I continue taking the 2-hour bus ride to the oncology ward. I use the money to buy expertise. I know I cannot go to the police yet. If I walk into a precinct with a stack of raw bank statements and a story about a sibling, a desk sergeant will treat the situation as a messy civil dispute. They will tell me to take it to small claims court. I need a cohesive narrative. I need irrefutable proof of a crime. I request a personal day from the hospital and ride the commuter train down to San Jose. I visit a firm specializing in corporate fraud and private intelligence. I hire an independent private investigator named Vargas and a forensic accountant named Elias. They charge a steep retainer, but I sign the engagement paperwork without hesitation. I sit in their glass-walled conference room and slide my digital files onto their secure network. I hand them the original loan application, the routing numbers, the internet protocol addresses, and the coerced promissory note my father drafted. I tell them I need to know exactly how the theft occurred and where the capital actually went. I leave the office and go back to my tiny apartment, waiting for professionals to decode the wreckage of my financial life. The call comes 4 days later. Vargas is a former state investigator who speaks in short, deliberate sentences. He asks me to return to San Jose. When I arrive, he and Elias are waiting in the same conference room. Vargas pulls up the commercial loan application on a large wall monitor. He zeroes in on the final page of the document. You cannot secure a commercial note of this size by merely checking a box on a website, Vargas explains, tapping the screen with a laser pointer. The bank requires rigid identity verification. It requires a notarized signature. He points to a blurry digital stamp at the bottom of the portable document format file. Someone had to physically stand in front of a notary public, present a state-issued identification card bearing your name and sign this document under oath. Or he adds, turning to look at me, the notary themselves is part of the fraud, and stamped a forged document without you present. Either way, this detail elevates the crime from basic identity theft to institutional fraud. Someone walked into a room and legally swore they were Anna Porter. The technical reality of the forgery makes my stomach turn, but the financial trail Elias uncovers is far more disturbing. Elias traces the routing numbers from the wire transfer receipt I found in the bank archive. The narrative David spun on the patio falls apart the moment Elias pulls the receiving account data. David told me he needed quick cash for server space and developer fees for his tech startup. He claimed it was bridge capital. The $85,000 did not go into a business checking account associated with any application development company. It did not go into his personal account in Marin County. Elias hands me a printed spreadsheet. The funds were wired directly into a limited liability company registered in the state of Delaware. Delaware is a notoriously opaque jurisdiction. People register corporate entities there specifically to shield the identities of the true owners and to move money without drawing regulatory attention. A week later, Vargas asks me to meet him at a quiet coffee shop near the hospital in Oakland. The rain has stopped, but the California air is unseasonably cold. I sit at a corner table holding a paper cup of black coffee, watching him walk through the glass door. He does not smile. He sits across from me and slides a thick manila folder across the wooden table. He leans in, keeping his voice low to blend with the ambient noise of the espresso machine. I reviewed the digital footprint and the corporate shell structure, Vargas says. Your brother is not a mastermind. His digital tracks are incredibly sloppy. The network address used to initiate the loan application pings right back to his home router in Marine. He did not even use a virtual private network to hide his location. Vargas taps the thick manila folder with his index finger. But the destination of the money is a different story. Whoever set up the Delaware Corporation to receive and hide these funds knew exactly what they were doing. This was not a panic move by a desperate entrepreneur trying to save a failing application. This was a calculated financial maneuver designed to launder stolen capital. I stare at the folder resting on the table. The steam rises from my coffee cup. The words Vargas just spoke ring in my ears. David is lazy. David buys expensive watches and posts vacation photos and expects the world to hand him success. David does not know the first thing about incorporating anonymous shell companies in distant states to bypass tax tracking. The betrayal deepens, expanding from a single act of sibling theft into something far more sinister. Someone else guided my brother. Someone else built the infrastructure to receive the money stolen in my name. The realization hits me like a physical blow. The conspiracy is not just David acting alone in his home office. There is a hidden architect behind the $85,000 theft. I pick up the folder, knowing the documents inside will point me directly toward the person who taught my brother how to ruin me. I leave the coffee shop and step out into the damp Oakland air. The sky is a flat uniform gray and the streets are slick with leftover rain from the morning storm. The manila folder Vargas handed me feels dense and heavy against my side. He gave me the raw data, but I need to process it in my own space, away from the noise of espresso machines and the casual chatter of strangers. I walk the 4 blocks back to my studio apartment. Every step feels different now. I am no longer walking as a victim weighed down by insurmountable debt. I am walking as someone who finally holds the map to the maze. My apartment building is an older brick structure. The elevator has been broken for 2 months, so I climb the 3 flights of stairs to my floor. The hallway smells faintly of bleach and stale cooking oil. I unlock the door and step inside. The studio is quiet. My young roommate Chloe is out for the evening working a late shift at the campus library. The silence is exactly what I need. I set my keys on the counter. I take off my coat and hang it on the back of a chair. I sit at my small kitchen table and turn on the overhead light. I clear away a stack of medical journals and set the manila folder down in the center of the table. I take a slow, deep breath. I open the cover and pull out the financial trace Elias prepared. Elias is a meticulous professional. He did not just provide a summary, he provided a step-by-step deconstruction of a financial crime. He pulled the official articles of incorporation from the Delaware Division of Corporations. I read the formation date printed in stark black ink at the top of the page. October 12th. I open my laptop and cross-reference this date with the original loan application from the bank portal. The fraudulent loan was executed on November 2nd. That is exactly 21 days later. The timeline shatters the narrative David fed me by the pool in Napa. He looked me in the eye and told me he panicked. He said he stole my identity because his technology startup suddenly hit a financial wall and he needed bridge capital overnight to keep the servers running. It was a fabricated story designed to make me feel sorry for his entrepreneurial struggles. The infrastructure required to hide the stolen funds was built 3 weeks before the crime even occurred. This was premeditated down to the hour. They planned the theft while looking me in the face during Sunday dinners. I scanned down to the section of the document listing the registered agent. Delaware is famous in the financial world for allowing corporate entities to remain anonymous. It is a state designed to shield true owners from public records and regulatory scrutiny. But Elias knows how to dig through franchise tax payments and registered agent filings to uncover the human beings operating the levers behind the curtain. A registered agent is the individual legally authorized to receive tax and legal correspondence on behalf of a corporate entity. The name printed on the legal filing is not David Porter. The name is Thomas Porter, my father. I stare at his name for a long time. The letters seem to blur and sharpen on the page. My father spent 40 years working as a senior risk management consultant for large corporate firms in San Francisco. His entire career revolved around isolating financial liabilities and protecting parent companies from exposure. He evaluated corporate structures to find weaknesses, and he built defenses to prevent financial collapse. He is a man who knows exactly how to build legal firewalls. David is a careless 35-year-old who barely understands basic accounting principles. David could never engineer a Delaware shell corporation to receive stolen funds and bypass standard banking security. But Thomas could. Thomas built the vault. David just pulled the trigger. I turned to the next page in the folder. Vargas included a deep background check on the notary public who stamped the fraudulent commercial loan application. The bank requires rigid identity verification for a commercial loan of this size. Someone had to swear under oath they were Anna Porter and provide matching identification. The digital stamp on the portable document format file was blurry, but Vargas used image enhancement software to read the commission number and the printed name, Cynthia Reed. Vargas ran a routine employment history on her. Cynthia Reed is not a random notary working at a local shipping store. She is a senior paralegal at the exact corporate consulting firm my father retired from 5 years ago. She worked directly under his supervision for a decade. A notary public is a state-commissioned official. Forging their stamp or colluding with a notary to falsify legal documents elevates this from a simple, desperate theft into a coordinated institutional fraud. It carries severe federal penalties. My father leveraged a professional relationship to secure the final piece of the puzzle required to execute the theft of my identity. The reality of the coordination settles deep into my chest. This was not a brother making a desperate, isolated mistake. This was a synchronized family operation. My father procured a loyal former subordinate to provide the legal notarization required by the commercial bank. He engineered the corporate shell to receive the cash without triggering flags under his son's name. He directed David to use my pristine credit score as the sacrificial lamb. They sat around their Napa Valley dining table drinking expensive wine and mapped out the destruction of my future with clinical precision. I feel a physical blow right below my ribs. It is the kind of visceral pain that makes you double over and gasp for air. The betrayal is so profound it strips the oxygen from my lungs. My own father weaponized his decades of corporate expertise to ruin me, just to keep his golden child afloat. He sacrificed my financial stability, my peace of mind, and my future to maintain the illusion of his son's success. I press my hands flat against the cheap laminate of my kitchen table. The surface is cold. I wait for the tears. I expect the familiar wave of daughterly grief to wash over me, because that is what usually happens when my family lets me down. I expect to cry over the father who taught me how to ride a bicycle, turning into the architect of my ruin. But the tears do not arrive. The grief has been entirely consumed by a cold, radiating focus. The sadness burns away and leaves behind a pure analytical drive. I leave the apartment and walk to a local office supply store on the corner of my street. The bright fluorescent lights of the store match my sudden clarity. I walk down the aisles with a singular purpose. I purchase a large corkboard, a box of silver pushpins, a pack of clear plastic sheet protectors, a set of colored markers, and a heavy-duty black binder. I pay for the items and walk briskly back to my studio. I lean the corkboard against the bare wall near my twin bed. I become a clinician dissecting a diseased organ. I start pinning the documents to the board. I place the bank loan application dead center. I pin the internet protocol address trace showing the network location in Marine County right next to it. I take a black marker and draw a thick line from David to the loan. Then I pin the Delaware Limited Liability Company formation document to the right side of the board. I highlight the date October 12th in bright yellow. I highlight the name Thomas Porter. I connect the wire transfer receipt directly to the shell company, showing the exact path the $85,000 traveled. Finally, I pin Cynthia Reed's employment record to the left side, drawing a thick line from her forged notary stamp back to my father's consulting firm. I step back and look at the wall. The corkboard maps the conspiracy perfectly. It visualizes the hidden architecture of their crime. But the corkboard is just a map. The black binder will serve as the executioner. I take my time organizing the raw evidence into a transportable format. I use plastic tabs to separate the documents into clear, undeniable categories for whoever reads it next. Section 1 contains the fraudulent loan application and proof of my pristine credit history prior to the theft. This establishes the baseline and the damage. Section 2 holds the internet network traces, proving the physical location of the forgery traced directly back to David's home router. This establishes the digital origin. Section 3 houses the Delaware corporate records tying the receiving account directly to Thomas. This proves the money laundering and the premeditation. Section 4 contains the notary commission details and Cynthia Reed's employment history linking her directly to my father's past influence. This proves the institutional forgery. Section 5 is the coerced promissory note my parents forced me to sign on their patio. That document no longer represents my submission. It now serves as documented proof of their active attempt to cover up the crime and silence the victim after the fact. Every single piece of paper is slid carefully into a clear protector. The plastic sleeves slide into the metal rings with a satisfying click. The black binder sits on my kitchen table, heavy and absolute. I run my hand over the dark textured cover. The emotional pain of being the unloved daughter has been transmuted into a hyper-focused drive for justice. I am no longer a clinical trial coordinator trying to figure out how to pay for a broken vehicle transmission. I am no longer the quiet scapegoat trying to earn the validation of people who view me as collateral damage. I am a lead investigator holding a fully documented federal fraud case. The family dynamic has officially dissolved into a criminal conspiracy. The boundaries have shifted from emotional neglect into the realm of federal statutes. The next step is terrifyingly clear. I cannot resolve this by giving my mother polite answers over the phone. I cannot resolve this by demanding explanations at a dining room table in Napa. The people who engineered this theft do not respect family meetings. They only respect leverage and authority. I reach for my phone and open the internet browser. I search for the address of the Financial Crimes Division of the San Francisco Police Department. I write the address down on a piece of paper and set it on top of the black binder. The time for protecting the Porter family reputation has expired. The machinery of the justice system is waiting, and I am finally ready to hand over the keys. The morning sun hits the windows of my Oakland apartment, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. I wake up before my alarm rings. The black binder is still sitting exactly where I left it on the laminate table. I get out of bed and make a deliberate choice about how to dress. I bypass my hospital scrubs and my casual weekend clothes. I choose a tailored navy blue blazer, a crisp white blouse, and dark trousers. It is the kind of outfit you wear when you want to be taken seriously by people who spend their lives looking for reasons to dismiss you. I am not dressing like a victim seeking sympathy. I am dressing like a professional delivering an undeniable set of facts. I pick up the binder. It feels dense in my hands, a physical manifestation of my family's betrayal. I walk down the 3 flights of stairs to the street and catch an early commuter train into San Francisco. The weather has shifted since that rainy Tuesday on the bridge. The sky is a sharp, clear blue. The city moves around me with its usual frantic rhythm, commuters holding paper coffee cups and rushing toward office buildings entirely unaware of the invisible threshold I'm about to cross. The headquarters of the San Francisco Police Department is a formidable building. It smells of industrial floor wax, old paper, and stale air conditioning. I approach the front desk and tell the uniformed officer I need to report a multi-jurisdictional financial fraud. He looks at me, glances at my tailored blazer, and points me toward a bank of elevators. I ride up to the Financial Crimes Division. The waiting area is Spartan. There are rigid plastic chairs and a bulletin board covered in faded public notices. I sit down and wait for 45 minutes. Every minute that passes is an opportunity to stand up, walk back to the elevator, and pretend my father did not engineer my ruin. My heart beats a steady, measured rhythm against my ribs. I do not stand up. A door opens and a man walks into the waiting area holding a generic cardboard coffee cup. He calls my name. He introduces himself as Detective Ramirez. He is a veteran investigator with graying hair, weary eyes, and a dress shirt that has lost its crispness somewhere around hour 10 of his shift. He looks like a man who has spent 20 years listening to people lie about money. He leads me down a narrow corridor into a windowless interview room. There is a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs. We sit across from each other. Ramirez opens a blank notepad and clicks his pen. He takes a sip of his coffee and looks at me with a mild, practiced skepticism. "So tell me what brings you in today," he says. I start with the basic outline. I tell him my brother took out an $85,000 commercial loan in my name using my social security number. Ramirez sighs a quiet exhalation through his nose. His posture relaxes into a slump. He has heard this story 100 times. A desperate sibling steals a credit card, maxes it out, and the family falls apart. Ms. Porter, Ramirez begins, his tone bordering on patronizing. "I understand you are upset, but when a family member misuses personal information to secure a loan, the district attorney is highly reluctant to pursue criminal charges. Often the lines of consent are blurry. Families share addresses and financial histories. We typically advise victims in your position to take this to civil court. Sue him for the damages. This is a family dispute, not a priority criminal investigation." He is trying to shut the door before I even walk into the room. 2 months ago, the authority in his voice would have intimidated me. I would have nodded, apologized for wasting his time, and left. But the woman who allowed herself to be silenced died on a wet highway. I do not argue with him. I simply place the black binder onto the metal table and flip it open to the first tab. "I understand why you would assume this is a civil matter," I say, keeping my voice level and clinical. "But my brother did not just borrow my identity to pay off a credit card. He acted as the front for a coordinated money laundering operation engineered by my father." Ramirez stops clicking his pen. He looks at me, his weary eyes narrowing just a fraction. I turn to section 3 of the binder. I slide the Delaware corporate formation documents toward him, followed by the bank transfer receipts. The $85,000 was not deposited into my brother's account, I explain. It was wired into a limited liability company registered in Delaware. The entity was created exactly 21 days before the fraudulent loan was executed. Ramirez leans forward. He sets his coffee cup down. I point to the highlighted name on the page. The registered agent for the shell company is Thomas Porter, a retired senior risk management consultant. He is my father. He built the corporate structure to receive the stolen funds before the crime even occurred. I turn back to section 2. I show him the Internet Protocol address trace provided by my private investigator. I prove the application was submitted from David's home network in Marin County. Then I turn to section 4. This is the piece that changes the temperature in the room. The bank required a notarized signature to approve a commercial loan of this size. I say, sliding the enhanced image of the notary stamp across the table. Someone had to swear under oath they were me. The notary public who stamped this document is Cynthia Reed. She is a senior paralegal at the exact corporate firm where my father worked for a decade. She was his direct subordinate. Ramirez picks up the paper. He studies the forged notary stamp and the employment history tying the paralegal to my father. He traces the timeline with his index finger, moving from the Delaware incorporation date to the forged signature to the wire transfer. The boredom vanishes from his face entirely. His posture straightens. The weary detective is replaced by a predator who just caught the scent of blood. He looks up from the binder and stares at me. The silence in the room stretches for several seconds. "You put this together yourself?" he asks. "I hired an independent forensic accountant and a private investigator," I reply. "The raw data is all there, certified and traceable." My father used his professional connections to secure a forged legal document, built a shell corporation to bypass banking security, and used his son to execute the theft. Ramirez closes the binder and rests his hands flat on the cover. He takes a deep breath. "You are right," Ramirez says, his voice stripped of all its previous condescension. "This is not a family dispute. This is felony identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. It crosses state lines, which makes it a federal issue. The forged notary stamp alone carries mandatory jail time." He opens his desk drawer and pulls out a stack of official statement forms. He places them on the table along with a black pen. He looks me directly in the eyes, ensuring I understand the gravity of the threshold we are standing on. "I need to make something very clear to you," Ramirez says, leaning over the table. "Right now, this is a terrible secret you are keeping. The moment you sign this sworn statement, it becomes the property of the state of California. The district attorney will issue subpoenas. Warrants will be executed. Assets will be frozen." He pauses, letting the words sink in. "Once the wheels start turning, you cannot stop them," he continues. "In a few weeks, your mother is going to call you crying. Your brother is going to beg for mercy. Your father is going to threaten you. They are going to promise to pay you back double if you just drop the charges. I need you to understand that you cannot drop the charges. Once you sign this paper, you are no longer in control of the outcome. The state takes over. Are you prepared to send your own family to prison?" I look at the statement forms. I picture my mother pouring a glass of Chardonnay on her patio, telling me to stop being selfish. I picture my father checking his $10,000 vintage watch while I stood freezing in the rain. I picture my brother lounging by a pool, spending money procured through my financial ruin. They did not hesitate to sacrifice my life to protect their comfort. I pick up the pen. "I will not change my mind," I say. My voice is dead calm. It holds no anger, only the cold certainty of gravity taking its course. I sign my name at the bottom of the first page. I sign the second page. I hand the documents back to Detective Ramirez. He reviews my signature, nods once, and places the paperwork into a red folder. "We will be in touch, Ms. Porter," he says. "Do not discuss this with anyone. Act as if everything is normal." I stand up, smooth the lapels of my navy blazer, and walk out of the interview room. I retrace my steps down the narrow corridor, past the front desk, and out through the heavy glass doors of the precinct. I step out into the bright California sun. The air is crisp and clean. The city is still moving with its usual frantic rhythm, but the world feels fundamentally different. The heavy burden of being the unloved daughter has been lifted from my shoulders and handed over to the justice system. The machinery of the state has officially been activated. Somewhere in the Napa Valley, my parents are drinking expensive coffee in their pristine kitchen. Somewhere in Marin County, my brother is driving his luxury vehicle to a boutique gym. They are breathing easy, secure in the belief that they successfully manipulated me into submission. They have absolutely no idea that a ticking clock has just been attached to their lives and the countdown has already begun. It takes exactly 14 days for the silence to break. I spend those 2 weeks living a double life. At the hospital, I continue coordinating clinical trials, managing patient protocols, and maintaining my professional composure. In my tiny Oakland apartment, I am waiting for the unseen gears of the justice system to turn. Detective Ramirez instructed me to act completely normal to give my family no indication that a federal investigation has been launched. Acting normal means ignoring the persistent anxiety humming beneath my skin and waiting for my mother to make contact. The text message arrives on a Thursday afternoon while I am reviewing lab results. The notification lights up my phone screen displaying Brenda's name. I pick up the device and read the message. "We are having a formal family dinner at the house this Saturday," it reads. "We have big news to celebrate. Do not be late." The arrogance embedded in that short message is staggering. There is no inquiry about how I am doing. There is no mention of the missed loan payments. There is only a summons to their territory to act as an audience for whatever new triumph my brother has supposedly achieved. A month ago, that text would have triggered a wave of resentment and a deep reluctance to drive up to Napa. Today, it triggers a profound sense of anticipation. This is not an invitation to a family dinner. This is the staging ground for a demolition. I reply with 3 words, "I will be there." Saturday evening arrives, and I prepare for the event with the same clinical precision I applied to organizing the black binder. I do not wear the casual clothes I usually wear to family gatherings to blend in and avoid attention. I select my wardrobe as if I am preparing to cross-examine a hostile witness. I put on a sharp tailored navy blazer, a crisp button-down shirt, and dark slacks. The structured clothing acts as physical armor against the emotional manipulation I know is waiting for me. I place the thick manila folder containing the copy of the official police report into my leather tote bag. The weight of the paper is a constant, comforting reminder of my leverage. The drive up the highway feels entirely different this time. The anxiety of facing my parents is gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical focus. I pull into the long gravel driveway of the Napa estate, just as the sun is setting, casting a golden light over the surrounding vineyards. The house looks immaculate. The landscaping is pristine, and the exterior lights illuminate the expensive architecture. I unlock the front door and step into the foyer. The air immediately hits me with the scent of roasted garlic herbs and expensive catering. Brenda did not cook tonight. She hired a private chef to prepare the meal. The level of expenditure happening in this house while my name sits in collections for $85,000 is a testament to their absolute detachment from my reality. I walk into the expansive living room. The scene unfolding before me is a masterclass in performative wealth. Thomas is standing near the marble fireplace wearing a cashmere sweater, holding a crystal flute of champagne. David and Jessica are seated on the velvet sofa looking relaxed and triumphant. Jessica is wearing a designer silk dress, and David is holding his own glass of champagne, the vintage luxury watch catching the light from the chandelier. Brenda spots me entering the room. She glides over, her face arranged into an expression of radiant joy. "Anna, honey, you made it," she says, kissing the air near my cheek. She hands me a glass of champagne. "Drink up, we are celebrating." I take the glass, but I do not drink. I stand near the edge of the seating area, adopting my role as the quiet observer for the final time. "What are we celebrating?" I ask, keeping my voice pleasant and entirely neutral. David stands up, setting his glass down on the coffee table. His chest is puffed out, radiating the kind of unearned confidence only a golden child can manage. The new app is officially entering its next phase, he announces. And the best part is, I just secured a major new line of commercial credit to fund the expansion. The words hit the air and linger. He secured a new line of credit. The hypocrisy is so dense it feels tangible. He ruined my credit score to fund his fantasy, and now he is standing in a multi-million-dollar home, boasting about securing legitimate funding for his next venture. That is wonderful, David, I say, taking a small sip of my drink to mask the tight line of my mouth. It gets better, Jessica chimes in, her voice bright and enthusiastic. Since the business is stabilizing, we are officially shopping for a house in Walnut Creek. We put an offer in on a beautiful 4-bedroom property this morning. I look at Jessica. She is completely insulated from the mechanics of her husband's success. She believes the narrative they feed her. She believes David is a brilliant entrepreneur providing for their future. She does not know the down payment for that Walnut Creek home is likely subsidized by the money her father-in-law laundered through a Delaware shell company. Thomas raises his glass, commanding the attention of the room. He looks at David with a level of pride he has never once directed toward me. To David, he says, his voice resonant and full of authority. A true entrepreneur knows how to navigate the difficult times to reach the summit. They clink their glasses. The sound of crystal ringing in the living room is the soundtrack of their entitlement. They are celebrating the financial freedom they stole from me. They are toasting to a future built on my subjugation. I stand there holding my untouched champagne, watching the performance. I do not feel anger anymore. I only feel the cold, hard reality of the folder resting inside my leather bag. The private chef announces dinner is served. We move into the formal dining room. The table is set with fine china, heavy silverware, and a lavish floral centerpiece. I take my seat at the far end of the mahogany table. Brenda sits to my left, Thomas to my right. David and Jessica take the seats opposite me. The chef serves a meticulously plated salad course followed by a roasted tenderloin. The conversation flows effortlessly around me. David talks about his developer team and the features of his luxury application. Jessica talks about the interior design plans for their prospective new house. Brenda talks about the upcoming wine tasting she is hosting for her country club friends. I eat my salad quietly, watching them. I observe the way Thomas subtly directs the conversation, always steering it back to David's accomplishments. I observe the way Brenda smiles at her son, her eyes shining with absolute devotion. They are so deeply entrenched in their own mythology, they cannot sense the shift in the atmosphere. They look at me sitting quietly at the end of the table, and they see a defeated scapegoat. They see a woman who has accepted her place as the collateral damage of their success. As the main course is cleared and the chef pours a second round of expensive red wine, Thomas taps his knife against his glass. The table quiets down. My father stands up holding his wine. He looks around the table, his gaze resting on each person before finally landing on me. I want to make another toast, he says. His voice drops into a lower register, signaling a moment of manufactured sincerity. This past year has had its challenges. But the true measure of a family is not how they handle the easy times. It is how they handle the difficult ones. He raises his glass slightly, looking directly at me. He is using this toast to reinforce the narrative of my compliance. He is publicly validating the lie that the $85,000 theft was just a temporary hurdle we overcame together. To family. Thomas says, his tone smooth and polished, sticking together through thick and thin, protecting each other. Because at the end of the day, family is the only thing that truly matters. David raises his glass. Here, he says. Brenda smiles and raises hers. To family, she echoes. I do not raise my glass. I sit perfectly still, my hands resting in my lap. The silence radiating from my end of the table becomes noticeable. The glasses hover in the air, waiting for my participation. I look at my father, who is waiting for me to complete the ritual of submission. I look at my brother, who is already irritated by my hesitation. I smile. It is a tight, cold smile that does not reach my eyes. I reach down to the floor next to my chair and slide my hand into my leather tote bag. My fingers brush against the thick manila folder. I wrap my hand around the cardboard edge. The trap is fully set. The audience is seated. the final performance is about to begin. The private chef returns to the dining room carrying a large silver tray. He moves quietly around the perimeter of the mahogany table serving the main course. He places heavy porcelain plates in front of each of us featuring pan-seared halibut resting on a bed of truffle risotto with roasted root vegetables. The aroma of brown butter and sage fills the space, mingling with the scent of the expensive floral centerpiece. The chef pours another round of Cabernet Sauvignon into the crystal glasses and silently retreats back to the kitchen. I pick up my heavy silver fork and push a piece of risotto around the edge of my plate. The room is warm and insulated against the cool California evening outside. David does not waste any time resuming his position at the center of attention. He leans forward, resting his forearms on the table, energized by the wine and his own perceived brilliance. He launches into a detailed monologue about his application venture. He talks about user acquisition costs and scaling his platform for a global market. He uses corporate jargon, seamlessly weaving words like synergy and disruptive innovation into his sentences. It is an incredibly polished script. If you were sitting at this table and you did not know his entire lifestyle was currently financed by a stolen social security number, you might actually believe he was a visionary. Jessica looks at her husband with wide, admiring eyes. She takes a small bite of her fish and nods along, completely captivated by his ambition. Brenda watches her son with a soft, maternal glow radiating pure validation. Thomas occasionally interjects with brief words of corporate approval, reinforcing David's ego. I sit at the far end of the table, chewing my food slowly. I am listening to his fake vocabulary and contrasting it with the real vocabulary I learned from the private investigator and the police detective. Words like felony and wire fraud and money laundering. David shifts the topic back to his prospective new house in Walnut Creek. He complains about the current housing market and the strict requirements of mortgage lenders. He talks about the rigorous underwriting process required to secure a jumbo loan. He casually mentions how glad he is that his new line of credit will help him bypass some of the standard banking hurdles. He actually uses the word credit. He hands me the exact opening I need on a silver platter. I set my fork down on the porcelain plate. The metal makes a sharp clicking sound that cuts through his cadence. Speaking of credit, I say. My voice is not loud, but it carries a distinct edge that slices through the ambient warmth of the room. I need the $85,000 paid off tomorrow. The acoustic shift in the dining room is immediate and absolute. The cheerful flow of conversation hits a concrete wall. David stops talking mid-sentence, his mouth hovering slightly open. Jessica looks up from her plate, her brow furrowing in confusion because she lacks the context for my statement. Brenda lowers her wine glass slowly, her radiant maternal smile vanishing, instantly replaced by a tight mask of apprehension. Thomas reacts the way a seasoned corporate executive reacts to an insubordinate employee disrupting a board meeting. He lets out a long, slow sigh. He leans back in his dining chair and crosses his arms over his cashmere sweater. He puts on his best disappointed patriarch face. Anna, we have talked about this, Thomas says. His tone is measured and heavy with manufactured patience. David is at a critical juncture. His business is just taking off, and tying up his liquid capital right now would be catastrophic for his growth trajectory. You need to be patient. We are handling it. He speaks to me as if I am a child, asking for a toy he already promised to buy next week. He completely ignores the fact that my life has been stalled for 2 years. He ignores the collections calls and the broken car and the freezing rain. Brenda immediately jumps in to support her husband, acting as the emotional enforcer of the family hierarchy. She leans across the table, fixing me with a sharp, warning glare. She delivers the exact line she has used to manage my grievances since we stood on the patio 2 years ago. He made a mistake, Brenda says, her voice adopting that familiar shrill quality. He is family. You need to let this go. I look at my mother. I analyze the way she weaponizes the concept of family to demand my silence. She expects me to absorb the financial ruin of an $85,000 commercial default because sharing DNA somehow makes federal crimes acceptable. David recovers from his initial shock and goes on the offensive. He rolls his eyes, letting out a scoff of pure disdain. He looks at me from across the mahogany table with an expression of intense irritation. God. Anna, are you still obsessing over that? David asks. He shakes his head as if he is the true victim of my relentless nagging. I told you the startup needed bridge capital. I said I would handle it when the funding round closes. You are ruining a perfectly good dinner by bringing up ancient history. I sit perfectly still, taking in their combined assault. A year ago, this coordinated attack would have worked. My heart would have raced, and my throat would have closed up. I would have looked down at my lap, apologized for ruining the mood, and retreated back to my Oakland apartment in silent shame. I would have accepted the label of the selfish sister just to keep the peace. Today, my pulse does not elevate a single beat. I do not raise my voice to defend myself. I do not cry or list the countless ways my life has been damaged by their actions. Explaining your pain to people who benefit from it is a waste of breath. I reach down toward the floor beside my chair. I slide my hand into my leather tote bag and grasp the thick cardboard edge of the manila folder. I pull it out and lift it over the edge of the table. I am not obsessing, I say, keeping my voice completely even and devoid of emotion. I am just delivering the update. I place the thick folder directly in the center of the mahogany table, right next to the lavish imported floral centerpiece. I push it forward just an inch, ensuring it sits under the bright illumination of the crystal chandelier. The folder rests there, heavy and undeniable. It is not a printout of an angry email. It is not a collection of bitter text messages. It is an official legal document. The top right corner of the folder is stamped with crisp blue ink. The official seal of the San Francisco Police Department is clearly visible against the tan paper. The words, Financial Crimes Division, are printed in bold black letters right beneath the seal. The silence that follows is entirely different from the silence that occurred when I first interrupted David. That was a silence of annoyance. This is a silence of sheer structural collapse. The air in the room becomes thin and fragile. Nobody moves. Nobody takes a breath. Jessica is the first to look closely at the folder. Her eyes trace the blue ink of the police seal, and a look of profound dread begins to form on her face. She looks from the folder to her husband, realizing the man sitting next to her is hiding something far darker than a simple family disagreement. David stares at the blue seal. The unearned confidence drains from his face, leaving behind a pale, sickly sheen. The arrogant entrepreneur vanishes, replaced by a terrified man who suddenly realizes the real world operates outside the protective bubble of his parents' wealth. Brenda stares at the folder as if a venomous snake has just been placed next to her dinner plate. Her lips part, but she cannot formulate a single word. The script she has relied on for 3 decades has been rendered entirely useless. Thomas remains frozen in his chair. The corporate consultant who spent his life analyzing risk suddenly finds himself staring at the ultimate liability. He looks at the official police seal, and then he slowly shifts his gaze to me. He is searching my face for a trace of hesitation, for a sign that this is merely a bluff designed to extract an apology. He finds nothing but cold, absolute certainty. The quiet observer is gone. The trap has snapped shut, and the walls of the dining room have effectively become the walls of a precinct interview room. I sit comfortably in my chair, waiting for my father to open the folder and read the specific details of his own destruction. My father does not reach for the folder immediately. He stares at it sitting next to the floral centerpiece, as if it is a vulgar object that does not belong on his formal dining table. His initial reaction is not fear, but profound annoyance. Thomas spent 40 years sitting in executive boardrooms, mitigating risk and silencing dissent. He operates on the assumption that any problem can be resolved through quiet intimidation. He clearly believes the manila folder contains a printed spreadsheet of my living expenses, or perhaps a petty demand letter from a cheap attorney I hired out of desperation. He lets out a harsh breath through his nose. He reaches his right hand forward and grasps the cover of the folder. He flips it open with a sharp flick of his wrist, intending to glance at the contents and swiftly dismiss whatever grievance I have brought to his dinner party. I watch his eyes scan the top of the first page. I watch the exact second his corporate armor fractures and falls away. The document sitting on top of the stack is not a printout of my monthly budget. It is the standardized incident report from the San Francisco Police Department. The header features the unmistakable municipal seal. Below the seal are the specific charges printed in stark black typography. Penal Code Section 530.5 for identity theft. Penal Code Section 487 for grand larceny. The transformation in my father is physical. The arrogant flush of the expensive red wine drains from his cheeks, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. His broad shoulders seem to cave inward. The hand holding the edge of the folder begins to tremble so violently that the thick paper rattles against the polished mahogany table. The man who just delivered a toast about family loyalty is suddenly staring down the barrel of a federal indictment. "What is this?" he whispers. His voice lacks any trace of its former commanding resonance. It is a hollow, breathy sound. "It is a police report," I state. I keep my voice measured and clinical. I speak at the exact volume and cadence a doctor uses to deliver a terminal diagnosis. I filed it 2 weeks ago with the Financial Crimes Division. Detective Ramirez is the lead investigator. He has already subpoenaed the commercial bank records and the digital routing logs. The word subpoena hangs over the dining table like a drop of poison in a glass of water. A subpoena means their financial lives are no longer private. It means the state is currently tearing through their accounts without asking for permission. Brenda processes the vocabulary a few seconds after her husband. When the reality of my statement finally penetrates her carefully curated reality, her reaction is visceral. She drops her heavy silver fork onto her porcelain plate, causing a loud clattering sound that makes Jessica jump in her seat. "You reported your own brother to the police?" Brenda asks. Her voice pitches upward into a shrill hysterical register. The soft maternal glow she wore just 10 minutes ago is entirely eradicated. She looks at me as if I am a stranger who just walked into her home and threatened her with a weapon. "Over money. You are going to send him to jail." I look at my mother. I analyze the absurdity of her logic. She is outraged that I reported a crime, but she feels zero outrage over the crime itself. She genuinely believes the unwritten rules of our family hierarchy supersede the laws of the state of California. She expects me to absorb an $85,000 theft in silence, so she never has to experience the social embarrassment of visiting her son in a correctional facility. David pushes his heavy dining chair backward. The wooden legs scrape harshly against the hardwood floor. He stands up, his chest heaving as he hyperventilates. The confident Silicon Valley visionary, who was just boasting about his new line of credit, has been replaced by a terrified, desperate man. He runs both hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. "You cannot do this, Anna," David says, his voice cracking with panic. He looks wildly around the room as if searching for an emergency exit that does not exist. "Call them tomorrow. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we had an arrangement. You signed a promissory note. You put it in writing." He clings to the promissory note, like a man grasping a piece of driftwood in a hurricane. He truly believes the piece of paper our father drafted on the patio 2 years ago is a magical shield that will protect him from the consequences of his actions. I look up at my brother. I feel zero empathy for the man unraveling in front of me. "The promissory note you forced me to sign was dated 3 weeks after the commercial loan was taken out," I reply. My tone is devoid of pity. I handed a copy of that note directly to Detective Ramirez. Do you know what he called it, David? He called it coerced evidence of a cover-up. I let those words settle over the room. I watch my father flinch as the legal reality of his clever trick becomes clear. "It does not protect you." I continue shifting my gaze from my brother back to my father. "It actually makes the situation significantly worse. It proves you knew the loan was fraudulent, and you actively conspired to silence the victim after the crime was committed. It establishes intent to conceal." The dining room descends into chaos. Brenda places her hands over her face, letting out a series of high-pitched sobbing gasps. David begins pacing back and forth behind his chair, muttering under his breath about how this cannot be happening. Jessica sits frozen in her seat. She was raised in an affluent, insulated environment where problems are solved by writing checks and hiring public relations firms. She values aesthetics and positive energy and social status above all else. A felony conviction is not in her vocabulary. She looks from the police report on the table up to the man she married. Her eyes are wide with a profound, creeping horror. She is realizing that the luxury lifestyle she enjoys, the vacations in Cabo San Lucas and the prospective house in Walnut Creek, are all built on a foundation of stolen identity and wire fraud. She is looking at her husband and seeing a stranger who is about to become a convicted felon. The noise in the room is deafening. The weeping and the pacing and the frantic denials create a symphony of collapsing egos. A year ago, this level of conflict would have sent me running for the front door. Today, I sit comfortably in my chair, letting the storm rage around me. I am not the one who needs to panic. I wait for a few moments, letting their terror reach a boiling point, then I place my hands flat on the table. But I am not done. The true weapon resting inside that manila folder has not even been detonated yet. The police report is merely the introduction. The real story, the revelation that will permanently destroy the fragile alliance holding this family together, is waiting a few pages deeper. I look directly at my father. He is still staring at the front page of the police report, his breathing shallow and rapid. He has not yet moved past the cover sheet. He thinks the worst news is the fact that his son is going to face an indictment. He does not yet realize that the private investigator and the forensic accountant followed his digital footprints all the way back to his own front door. "Keep reading, Dad," I say. My voice cuts through the sound of Brenda weeping and David pacing. Thomas looks up at me. His eyes are bloodshot and hollow. "Turn to page 4, I tell him. He hesitates. His corporate instincts are screaming at him to close the folder and call a defense attorney before looking at another piece of evidence. But the morbid curiosity of a trapped man forces his hand. He reaches out with trembling fingers and turns the heavy pages. He passes the narrative summary. He passes the list of specific criminal charges. He stops on the 4th page. It is the financial tracing chart prepared by Elias. It maps the exact flow of the $85,000 from the commercial bank through the Delaware Shell Corporation and into its final destination. Thomas stares at the chart. The remaining breath leaves his lungs in a sharp, audible hiss. He realizes the secret he has been keeping for 2 years is no longer a secret. The ultimate betrayal is about to be dragged into the light. My father stares down at the 4th page of the report. The ambient light from the crystal chandelier reflects off the glossy paper. His hands are physically shaking. The tremor travels up his arms, causing the fabric of his cashmere sweater to vibrate. He is looking at a financial tracing chart prepared by Elias, the forensic accountant. The chart is simple and devastating. It uses thick black arrows to track the exact movement of stolen capital. I do not let him process the information in silence. I want every person sitting at the mahogany dining table to hear the precise mechanics of the betrayal. I want the truth spoken aloud in the room where they tried to bury me. "You told me David needed that $85,000 to save his startup," I say. My voice echoes in the quiet space, cutting through the lingering scent of roasted garlic and wine. "You stood on the patio 2 years ago and spun a story about server costs and developer fees. You painted a picture of a desperate entrepreneur on the brink of a major breakthrough." I look at David. He is still standing behind his chair, gripping the wooden backrest. His knuckles are white. He looks terrified, but he also looks confused. He is waiting for our father to formulate a defense. He is waiting for the patriarch to deploy some clever corporate strategy to make the police report disappear. But Thomas remains frozen. The forensic accountant followed the wire transfers. I continue keeping my gaze fixed on my brother. The $85,000 left the commercial lender. It landed in the Delaware Shell Corporation established by our father. And then the money was divided. I point a manicured finger toward the paper trembling in my father's hands. $35,000 went to your business accounts, David, I say. That was your cut. But the remaining $50,000 of my stolen money did not go to your tech startup. I turn my head and look directly at my mother. Brenda is clutching her linen napkin against her chest, as if it can protect her from the words leaving my mouth. It went from that anonymous Delaware entity directly to First Republic Bank I State. I pronounced the name of the financial institution with sharp, deliberate clarity. It went to pay off the severe arrears on the mortgage for this exact house. Brenda lets out a choked gasp. It is a sharp, ugly sound that scrapes the back of her throat. Her hands drop to the table. The carefully maintained facade of the wealthy Napa Valley matriarch shatters into 1,000 irrecoverable pieces. She is no longer the polished hostess presiding over a catered dinner. She is a woman caught living in a house she could not afford, subsidized by the financial ruin of her own daughter. The ultimate twist lies bare under the dining room lights. The narrative I believed for 2 years was a calculated fiction. David did not mastermind the theft to fund a business venture. My brother is too lazy and too incompetent to engineer a multi-state money laundering operation. He was merely the bagman. Thomas and Brenda were secretly underwater on their $1 million mortgage. Thomas retired from his consulting firm too early. His investment portfolios must have underperformed. Instead of facing reality and downsizing to a smaller property, they chose to protect their country club image at all costs. Brenda could not bear the social humiliation of selling the estate and admitting they were out of money. So they turned to the one resource they viewed as expendable: me. They convinced David to use my pristine credit score to bail them out. They knew David was desperate for cash to keep his failing application afloat. They offered him a portion of the stolen funds in exchange for pulling the trigger. They instructed him to commit the forgery. They used his tech startup as a convenient cover story, ensuring that all my anger and resentment would be directed entirely at my brother. They sacrificed my ability to rent an apartment, my ability to buy a reliable car, and my peace of mind, just so they could keep hosting wine tastings in a house they did not truly own. Jessica pushes her dining chair back. The heavy wooden legs scrape against the floor. She stares at her in-laws with a look of pure, unfiltered disgust. Jessica married into this family believing she was entering a world of established generational wealth. She tolerates her husband's arrogance because she thought it was backed by genuine financial security. Now she realizes she is sitting at a table with a family of desperate grifters. She looks at the pan-seared halibut on her plate and her stomach visibly turns. She looks at Brenda, who is staring blankly at the floral centerpiece. She looks at Thomas, who is still holding the damning flowchart. The wealth she married into is an illusion propped up by wire fraud and felony identity theft. This was never about a bridge loan. I say, my voice dropping to a colder, quieter register. This was about a mortgage you could not pay. You sat back and watched me work 60-hour weeks at the hospital. You watched me take a 2-hour bus ride in the freezing rain because my car broke down. You told me to put my repairs on a credit card while you were using my stolen credit to keep a roof over your heads. Thomas finally lowers the paper. He places it carefully on top of the open folder. He does not look at me. He looks down at his hands resting on the mahogany table. The risk management consultant analyzed the situation 2 years ago and determined that his daughter was an acceptable loss. He calculated that I was too conditioned and too eager for their approval to ever fight back. He miscalculated the breaking point. David steps away from his chair. The confusion on his face slowly morphs into a chilling realization. He looks at our father. He looks at the police report resting in the center of the table. The truth of his role in the family dynamic crashes down on him. He was the golden child, but he was also the perfect shield. Thomas and Brenda knew that if the theft was ever discovered, the digital footprints would point directly to David's internet router. They knew the contact email on the fraudulent loan application carried David's name. They set him up to take the fall. They manipulated his ego, making him feel like a brilliant entrepreneur, securing alternative funding, while they secretly turned him into a human firewall. If the police came knocking, David would be the one arrested for identity theft, while Thomas remained hidden behind his anonymous Delaware corporation. "You used me," David whispers. The words barely make it past his lips. He is not speaking to me. He is speaking to the man sitting at the head of the table. He looks at his mother. "You told me it was safe," he says, his voice rising in pitch. "You said we would pay her back before she ever noticed the credit hit. You said nobody would ever find out about the shell company. Brenda squeezes her eyes shut. She shakes her head back and forth, refusing to look at her son. She cannot deny the accusation because the proof is sitting right next to her wineglass. They did not just sacrifice my future, I tell David, forcing him to face the reality of his situation. They sacrificed yours too. You committed the felony, David. You executed the forgery. The district attorney is going to look at those network logs and see your digital fingerprint on a federal crime. They handed you $35,000 to ruin your own life so they could keep playing rich in the wine country. The dynamic in the dining room permanently alters. The carefully constructed hierarchy collapses into a pile of ash. The parents who demanded respect and loyalty are exposed as parasites. The golden child who thought he could do no wrong realizes he was just a useful idiot. The scapegoat who was supposed to suffer in silence is the only person in the room holding the keys to their destruction. I sit back in my chair, resting my hands in my lap. I do not feel a single shred of guilt for the devastation unfolding around me. I gave them 2 years to fix their mistake. I gave them 2 years to honor their promises. Instead, they bought designer dogs and $10,000 vintage watches. They chose this ending. I simply provided the paperwork. The silence that follows is thick and suffocating. The air is heavy with the weight of impending prison sentences and public humiliation. Jessica stands up from the table, leaving her linen napkin crumpled on her chair. She does not say a word to anyone. She turns around and begins walking toward the front door. The sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor sounds like a ticking clock marking the final seconds of the Porter family facade. Jessica stops under the arched doorway of the foyer. She turns her head, looking back into the formal dining room. She does not look at my parents. She fixes her gaze entirely on David. I am taking the car, Jessica says. Her voice is devoid of warmth. It is a flat, hollow sound carrying the finality of a closing vault. Do not come home tonight. She turns around. The heavy oak front door opens and shuts. The lock engages with a sharp metallic click. The sound echoes through the cavernous space of the Napa Valley estate, marking the departure of the first casualty. Brenda sits at the table. The promise of the teaser is now fully realized. My mother goes dead quiet. The residual flush of the expensive Cabernet fades from her cheeks in a rapid, uneven wash, leaving her skin a pale, sickly gray. She is a woman who spent her entire adulthood curating an image of flawless prosperity. She serves on the board of local charities. She hosts garden parties for the affluent elite. Her entire identity is tethered to the perception of wealth. I watch her process the reality that the society she worships is about to read her name in a federal indictment. The impending social death terrifies her far more than the legal penalties. She realizes she is not just protecting a son from a minor inconvenience. She is going to lose everything. Thomas looks down at the open manila folder. He does not try to offer a clever corporate explanation. He does not deploy his seasoned negotiation tactics to minimize the damage. The evidence compiled by the forensic accountant is too precise. He spent 40 years assessing risk for major firms, and his final assessment tells him the game is lost. He drops the folder onto the mahogany table. It lands with a heavy thud next to his untouched plate of pan-seared halibut. He places his hands on the armrests of his dining chair and pushes himself up. He does not look at me. He does not look at his wife or his son. His ego is shattered beyond repair. He is a man who built his life on control, and he has just been outmaneuvered by the daughter he assumed was too weak to fight back. He turns his back to the room and walks slowly toward the hallway leading to his private home office. The sound of his footsteps retreats into the dark wing of the house. A heavy door shuts. The lock turns. He is isolating himself to call a defense attorney, leaving his family to burn in the dining room. David watches his father abandon the room. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. The patriarch is saving himself. The golden child turns his escalating panic toward the only target left in the room, his mother. David grips the edge of the dining table. His knuckles turn white under the severe strain. The veins in his neck protrude against his tailored collar. "You told me she would not notice," David shouts. His voice cracks, losing its deep, practiced resonance. He sounds like a terrified, trapped teenager, realizing he is about to face punishment for the first time in his life. You told me it was safe. Brenda flinches. She raises her hands, palms facing outward in a weak defensive gesture, trying to ward off the verbal assault. You said Anna never checks her credit? David continues, his volume rising until it echoes off the high ceilings. You said the shell company was bulletproof. He points a shaking finger toward the closed office door down the hall. He set me up. You both set me up to take the fall for your mortgage. The background dynamics of his entire life come rushing to the surface. David has never faced a consequence in his 35 years. Whenever he failed a university class, Brenda blamed the professor. Whenever he lost a job, Thomas made a phone call to a colleague and secured him a new position. Now facing the cold math of the federal justice system, Brenda cannot write a note to excuse his behavior. Thomas cannot make a phone call to the district attorney to smooth things over. David realizes his mother's protection is an illusion. The safety net is gone, replaced by a concrete floor. Brenda tries to speak, but her throat is dry. David, please, she manages to whisper. We will hire lawyers. We will fix this. Fix it. David lets out a harsh, manic laugh. It is a federal police report, Mom. They have the wire transfers. They have the network logs from my router. He paces the length of the dining room. His movements are erratic and uncoordinated. He grabs his crystal wine glass from the table and hurls it into the stone fireplace. It shatters upon impact, sending sharp fragments raining down onto the hearth. The red wine splatters against the gray stone like fresh blood. I do not flinch at the sound of breaking glass. I sit calmly in my chair. I reach for my water goblet. I take a slow, measured sip. The water is crisp and cold against my throat. The hostile action does not intimidate me anymore. It merely highlights his utter impotence. He is throwing glassware because he cannot throw away the facts. I watch the people who tormented me for years turn into terrified, turning on each other criminals. The public execution of their ego is absolute, complete, and captured in real time. The math of federal prison settles over the room like a heavy winter blanket. Wire fraud carries severe penalties under federal sentencing guidelines. Identity theft adds mandatory consecutive months to any potential sentence. They are looking at years behind bars, not probation. David is running those numbers in his head, and the total is breaking his mind. Brenda realizes her son is lost to her. The alliance of the perfect family has disintegrated in less than 10 minutes. She turns her desperate gaze back to me. She slides out of her dining chair. She drops to her knees on the expensive Persian rug. This is a woman who would not walk to her mailbox without full makeup and designer shoes. Now she is kneeling on the floor, ruining her silk trousers, discarding every ounce of her pride. Anna, she begs. Her voice is ragged, stripped of all its prior authority. You have to stop this. I am your mother. I look down at her. You stopped being my mother the day you decided my future was the price of your mortgage, I say. My voice is steady. I place the water glass back on the table. Brenda reaches forward, trying to grasp my hand. I pull it away. The physical distance between us mirrors the emotional chasm that has existed for decades. You sacrificed my ability to live a normal life so you could keep hosting catered dinners, I tell her. You used your own son as a shield. There is nothing left to stop Mom. The state of California owns this case now. I stand up from the table. I reach for the manila folder. I close the cover, securing the documents inside. I place it back into my leather tote bag. The smell of the roasted halibut and truffle risotto is now nauseating. The expensive food is growing cold on porcelain plates, a fitting monument to their ruined facade. David is still pacing near the fireplace, muttering to himself, running his hands through his hair. He does not even register my movement. He is too consumed by the vision of his impending arrest. Brenda remains on the floor, weeping into her hands. The sound is pathetic, devoid of dignity. I walk toward the foyer. I do not offer a parting word. There is no need for a dramatic exit line. The documents delivered the final blow. I open the heavy oak door and step out into the cool Napa Valley night. The air outside is clear. The stars are visible above the vineyards. I walk down the gravel driveway toward my aging Honda Civic. The transmission still whines. My bank account is still hovering near zero, but the crushing weight I have carried for 2 years is gone. The machinery of the state is officially moving. I unlock my car door knowing the next phase of this nightmare will not involve family dinners. The next phase involves search warrants, and the only remaining question is how fast the police will arrive. It takes exactly 72 hours for the San Francisco Police Department to process the evidence I delivered. I spend those 3 days moving through the oncology ward with a strange sense of detachment. I schedule patient appointments. I log clinical data. I eat lunch in the hospital cafeteria. The ordinary routine of my life continues while the foundation of my family's existence is being dismantled behind closed doors. The phone call arrives on a Tuesday morning. I am sitting at my desk reviewing a complex drug protocol when my cell phone vibrates against the laminate surface. I look at the caller identification. It is a San Francisco area code. I step out into the quiet hallway and press the phone to my ear. "Ms. Porter," a voice says. "It is Detective Ramirez." He sounds wide awake, his tone stripped of the weary skepticism he carried during our first meeting. He sounds like a man who just completed a successful operation. "Warrants were executed at dawn," Ramirez states. The cadence of his speech is brisk and professional. He is delivering an official update. I lean against the cool plaster wall of the hospital corridor. I close my eyes and let the reality of his words sink in. Warrants were executed. The abstract threat has finally materialized into physical action. Ramirez provides a brief clinical summary of the morning's events. He does not use dramatic language. He uses procedural facts, and those facts are devastating. At 6 in the morning, 2 marked police cruisers and an unmarked sedans pulled into the long gravel driveway of the Napa Valley estate. My parents were likely asleep insulated in their $2.4 million bubble. The authorities did not knock politely and wait for Brenda to serve them coffee. They executed a search and arrest warrant. I picture my father, Thomas, the retired risk management consultant. He spent his career assessing liabilities from high-rise corner offices. This morning he was forced out of his bed and led through his front door in handcuffs. He walked across the pristine landscaping while the sun came up, escorted by uniformed officers. The most devastating part of the arrest was not the physical restraint, it was the audience. Napa Valley is a community that thrives on observation. The neighbors walk their designer dogs early. They check their mailboxes. They notice everything. The sight of Thomas being loaded into the back of a police cruiser was witnessed by the exact people whose approval he valued above his own daughter. His country club reputation, carefully cultivated over decades of wine tastings and charity dinners, was instantly incinerated before breakfast. Simultaneously, a separate team executed a warrant in San Jose. David was not arrested at a sprawling estate. He was apprehended at a high-end artisanal coffee shop. The Silicon Valley visionary was standing in line waiting for a $7 espresso when detectives approached him. The arrogance he projected at the dining room table on Saturday night did not protect him. He was handcuffed in front of the baristas and the commuting tech workers. Ramirez delivers the final crucial detail of the operation. Because the stolen funds were routed through a Delaware shell corporation to pay a mortgage in California, the crime officially crossed state lines. "The Federal Bureau of Investigation is now involved," Ramirez explains. His voice drops, emphasizing the severity of the escalation. "We handed the corporate structuring data over to the federal prosecutor. This is no longer just a state-level identity theft case. It is a federal wire fraud investigation." The involvement of federal agents changes the entire landscape. State police deal with local crimes. The FBI deals with institutional corruption. My father built a corporate firewall to hide his theft, and that specific action attracted the most relentless investigative body in the country. I ask Ramirez about my mother. Brenda did not forge the notary stamp, and she did not build the Delaware Limited Liability Company. "Your mother is currently listed as an unindicted co-conspirator," Ramirez replies. "She signed the checks paying the mortgage from the account receiving the laundered funds. She benefited directly from the proceeds of the fraud. She has not been arrested today, but her legal exposure is significant." I process the scope of the devastation. Thomas is in custody. David is in custody. Brenda is trapped in the Napa house surrounded by evidence boxes knowing she is a target. The alliance of the Golden family has been entirely dismantled by the justice system. But the authorities did not just take their freedom, they took their oxygen. Ramirez informs me of the financial actions executed alongside the arrests. The federal prosecutor immediately filed a motion to freeze all bank accounts associated with Thomas, Brenda, and David. Every checking account, every savings account, every retirement portfolio containing liquid assets is now locked. The state seized control of their capital to prevent the flight of stolen funds. Furthermore, because the Napa Valley estate was maintained using the direct proceeds of wire fraud, the federal government placed a lien on the property under asset forfeiture laws. My parents cannot sell the house. They cannot leverage it for a loan. The $2.4 million asset is effectively paralyzed, waiting to be seized if a conviction is secured. The parents who manipulated me over an $85,000 debt are now rendered completely financially impotent overnight. The credit cards they used to buy imported wine and designer dogs will decline. The private chef cannot be paid. The facade is entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but the grim, terrifying reality of criminal defense lawyers and bail bondsmen. I thank Detective Ramirez for the update. I end the call and slip the phone back into the pocket of my scrubs. I stand in the hospital corridor for a long time. The fluorescent lights hum above me. Nurses walk past pushing medication carts. The world continues to turn. A year ago, the thought of my father in handcuffs would have sent me into a panic attack. I would have felt an overwhelming urge to fix the situation, to smooth things over, to absorb the blame. Today, I feel a deep settling calm. The responsibility for their actions has finally been transferred to the correct party. I walk back into the clinical office. I sit down at my desk and open the patient file I was reviewing before the phone rang. I focus on the data, the protocols, the science. I am a coordinator, and I have effectively coordinated the removal of the toxicity from my life. However, the calm is temporary. The justice system moves efficiently, but desperation moves faster. Thomas and Brenda are accustomed to solving problems with money. When the money is frozen, they will turn to the only remaining resource they have ever exploited. They will try to find a weakness in the armor I have built. They will try to manipulate the system by attacking the witness. The police report initiated the legal battle, but the emotional war is about to enter its most dangerous phase. With their assets locked and their reputations ruined, my parents have absolutely nothing left to lose, making their next move entirely unpredictable. The federal government does not simply freeze your bank accounts, they sever your connection to modern society. In the days following the Dawn arrests, my parents experience a financial asphyxiation that is far more punishing than physical incarceration. Thomas and Brenda possess a $2.4 million estate, 3 luxury vehicles, and a wine cellar stocked with rare vintages. Yet they cannot buy a gallon of milk. When the federal prosecutor filed the asset freeze, every debit card declined. Every credit line was suspended. The automated payments for their utility bills bounced. Thomas remains in a federal holding facility. The judge set bail at $500,000, citing the severity of the wire fraud and the sophisticated nature of the Delaware Shell Corporation. To secure his release through a bail bondsman, Brenda needs $50,000 in untraceable liquid cash. She also needs to retain a white-collar criminal defense attorney. The attorney demands a $100,000 retainer just to read the case file. Brenda cannot leverage the Napa Valley house because the asset forfeiture lien acts as a concrete wall around the property deed. She is trapped in a mansion with zero liquidity. For the first time in her pristine, curated life, my mother has to engage in the gray market economy. She cannot host a polite estate sale. The country club neighbors are already whispering about the police cruisers parked in her driveway earlier that week. Instead, Brenda quietly invites independent luxury dealers to the house through the back entrance. She sells the vintage luxury watch she and Thomas purchased for David just a few months prior. She opens her velvet jewelry boxes and liquidates her tennis bracelets, her diamond earrings, and the sapphire pendant Thomas gifted her for their 30th anniversary. She drains the wine cellar, selling cases of exclusive reserves to private buyers at a steep discount. She gathers the cash in heavy paper envelopes, counting $100 bills on the same mahogany dining table where I placed the police report. She secures enough cash to post bail for Thomas and hire the defense attorney. Thomas returns to the Napa estate wearing the same clothes he was arrested in. He is a ghost of his former self. His corporate arrogance is stripped away, leaving a hollow, terrified old man facing the end of his freedom. The defense attorney reviews the evidence assembled by my forensic accountant and delivers a grim prognosis. The paper trail is undeniable. The forged notary stamp is a smoking gun. The only viable strategy is to introduce reasonable doubt regarding the intent of the loan, and that requires the cooperation of the primary victim. This brings us to the phone call. It is a Thursday evening. I am sitting in my Oakland apartment reviewing a patient protocol on my laptop. The room is quiet. The rain is falling lightly against the window panes. My cell phone vibrates on the desk. I glance at the illuminated screen. The caller identification displays a name I have not seen on an incoming call in over a year. Mom. I stare at the phone. My initial instinct is to ignore it. I have nothing left to say to the woman who financed her lifestyle with my stolen identity. But a deeper, colder part of my brain tells me to answer. I need to hear the sound of the empire collapsing. I need to close the circle. I pick up the device and press the green button. I bring the phone to my ear and say a simple, flat hello. Anna, Brenda says. Her voice is unrecognizable. The practiced melodic tone she uses to charm her social circle is gone. It is replaced by a ragged, breathless friction. She sounds like a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the ground crumble beneath her feet. I do not offer a greeting. I do not ask how she is doing. I let the silence stretch over the cellular connection, forcing her to carry the weight of the conversation. Anna, please, Brenda begs. The desperation in her throat is visceral. You have to listen to me. I just spoke with the defense lawyers. They reviewed the documents you gave to the police. They said the federal prosecutor is building a formidable case against your father and your brother. What do you want, Mom? I ask. My tone remains clinical, matching the detachment I use when logging medical data. The lawyers told us there is a narrow window. Brenda says the words spilling out of her mouth in a frantic rush. If you contact the district attorney and recant your statement, we might have a chance. You can tell them you gave David verbal permission to use your information and you simply forgot. You can tell them the police report was filed during a family misunderstanding. If you introduce reasonable doubt, the prosecutor might offer a plea deal. They might drop the federal wire fraud charges down to a lesser misdemeanor. I listen to the sheer audacity of her request. She is asking me to commit perjury. She is asking me to walk into a federal building and lie to investigators, risking my own freedom and my professional career to save the people who threw me to the wolves. We are going to lose the house, Anna, she cries. Her voice cracks, dissolving into a wet, heavy sob. The federal government placed a lien on the property. We cannot pay the property taxes. We cannot even buy groceries without selling my jewelry. Your father could go to prison for 5 years. David could go to prison. You have to save us. I close my eyes. I transport my mind back to the concrete parking garage at the hospital. I remember sitting in my failing vehicle, gripping the steering wheel, crying because a ruthless debt collector had just humiliated me in front of my coworkers. I remember calling Brenda, begging for help, begging for the promised loan payments so I could simply survive. I remember her response. I remember the heavy theatrical sigh. I remember her telling me that David was under a lot of pressure, and that I was being selfish for bringing up my own suffering. I open my eyes. The Oakland apartment is still and calm. I cannot recant my statement, Mom, I say. The steady, unyielding cadence of my voice cuts through her weeping. You can, she pleads. The lawyer said if the primary witness changes her story, the foundation of the case weakens. You are not listening to me, I reply. I cannot recant because my testimony is no longer the foundation of the case. The bank records do not need my permission to exist. The Delaware corporate filings do not need my memory to be true. The forged notary stamp is physical evidence. The San Francisco Police Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have the paper trail. It is the state of California's case now. I am just a witness to the math. Brenda stops crying. The cold logic of my explanation extinguishes the last flickering ember of her hope. She realizes the trap Thomas built is inescapable. The corporate shell he designed to hide the stolen funds is the exact mechanism locking the prison door. Anna, how can you do this to us? Brenda whispers. It is a weak, hollow accusation stripped of all its former venom. I did not do this to you, I tell her. You did this to yourselves. You chose your luxury over my survival. You chose David's ego over my future. I just stopped shielding you from the consequences of your own greed. I pause, letting the final seconds of our relationship hang in the air. I think about the mantra she repeated every single time I tried to hold them accountable, the weaponized phrase she used to demand my silent submission. You always told me family sticks together, I say softly. Brenda inhales a sharp, shaking breath. I guess you and Dad will have plenty of time to stick together now, I tell her. Do not contact me again. I lower the phone from my ear. I press the red button ending the call. I navigate to the settings menu on my device. I select Brenda's contact profile. I tap the option to block the caller. I repeat the process for Thomas. I repeat the process for David. The boundary is permanently drawn in concrete. The bridge connecting me to the Porter family is incinerated, and I scatter the ashes. I place the phone face down on my desk. The quiet in my apartment is no longer the silence of a victim waiting for the next blow. It is the silence of a fortress. I have fortified my life against their toxicity. I do not feel joy regarding their impending incarceration, but I feel an overwhelming sense of safety. However, the justice system does not operate in a vacuum. A criminal case of this magnitude requires a conclusion, and the federal courts do not care about family boundaries. They require resolution. The trial dates will be set. The plea deals will be negotiated behind closed doors. The final accounting is approaching, and my parents are about to discover that the federal judge presiding over their case is far less forgiving than the daughter they discarded. It takes 14 months for the federal court system to process the indictments. During that time period, I do not receive any direct communication from the people who share my last name. The boundary I established remains intact. I learn about the disintegration of their lives through certified letters mailed to my Oakland apartment by the United States Attorney handling the prosecution. I open these thick paper envelopes at my kitchen table after returning from the hospital. The language inside is cold and procedural, detailing docket numbers and hearing dates. The machinery of justice grinds fine, and it grinds without requiring my daily emotional participation. The golden child is the first to break. David spent his entire existence insulated from consequence. When faced with the austere reality of a federal prosecutor holding physical proof of digital forgery, his fabricated entrepreneurial confidence evaporates. He lacks the psychological fortitude required to endure a trial. 9 months into the legal process, his defense attorney brokers an agreement. David signs a document admitting guilt to identity theft and wire fraud. He trades his plea for a reduced sentence recommendation. I read the transcript of his sentencing hearing. The judge addresses him in open court, stripping away the Silicon Valley visionary persona. The judge notes the predatory nature of targeting a sibling to fund a lifestyle beyond his means. David receives a 48-month sentence in a federal correctional institution. The man who once lounged by a private pool sipping premium tequila now wears standard-issue uniforms and adheres to a rigid institutional schedule. Jessica does not stand by her husband. She is a pragmatist. She built her brand as a Marin County fitness instructor on aesthetics and positive energy. A convicted felon does not fit her curated lifestyle. The week David enters his guilty plea, she files divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. She hires a ruthless family law practitioner who acts with surgical precision. Because the laundered funds were traced directly to Thomas and the Delaware shell entity, her attorney successfully argues, she had no knowledge of the crime. She legally isolates her premarital assets and the legitimate income generated by her yoga studio. She severs her financial liability, packs her designer wardrobe, and moves into a luxury condominium in Tiburon. David enters the prison system with no spouse, no technology venture, and no safety net. Thomas chooses a different path. My father refuses to accept defeat. He is a man accustomed to outsmarting the system. He elects to take his case to trial, believing his corporate intellect can confuse a jury. He pays exorbitant legal fees to a defense team who attempts to argue the Delaware Limited Liability Company was a legitimate holding firm. They try to cast the forged notary stamp as an independent action taken by a rogue paralegal acting under David's instruction. The strategy is a failure. The federal prosecutor introduces the electronic mail metadata connecting Thomas directly to the paralegal. They present the tracing charts mapping the exact path the $85,000 took from the commercial lender to the mortgage servicer holding the deed on the Napa property. The jury deliberates for less than 5 hours. Thomas is found guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The presiding judge shows zero leniency during the sentencing phase. He looks down from the bench at a retired risk management executive who weaponized his corporate knowledge to prey upon his own daughter. Thomas receives a 60-month sentence. In addition to the prison term, the court orders full financial restitution. The state demands the stolen capital be repaid to the original commercial lender to clear the fraudulent debt attached to my name. Restitution requires liquidity. Thomas does not possess any remaining liquid assets. He drained his retirement accounts attempting to fund David's failing application venture and paying his own defense attorneys. Therefore, the federal government initiates the next logical step. They enforce the asset forfeiture lien. The state seizes the Napa Valley estate. The $2.4 million property changes ownership with the strike of a gavel. The residence where I signed the coerced promissory note, the dining room where Thomas delivered hypocritical toasts about family loyalty, all of it is liquidated. The government auctions the property to a private buyer. The proceeds from the sale are used to satisfy the court fines, pay the commercial lender, and wipe the default from my credit history. The seizure of the real estate leaves Brenda with nothing. My mother never maintained a career outside the home. Her entire identity was intrinsically tied to her husband's wealth and her social standing among the wine country elite. With Thomas serving 5 years in a federal penitentiary and the estate auctioned off, she is forced to vacate the premises. She packs her remaining clothing into cardboard boxes. The luxury vehicles are repossessed. She moves to a tiny, dark rental apartment in Vallejo, a working-class city, located far away from the manicured vineyards and country clubs she once ruled. Her monthly income is reduced to a meager Social Security disbursement. The transition is brutal. The women she once hosted for catered garden parties do not call her new telephone number. The charity boards quietly erase her name from their letterheads and event programs. In her former circle, association with a convicted felon is a social contagion they refuse to risk. The excommunication is swift and unforgiving. She is no longer the polished matriarch distributing judgment. She is a pariah living in isolation. She spends her days in a cramped living room, holding the memory of a life she threw away to protect an illusion. I do not celebrate their destruction. I view the outcome with the same clinical detachment I apply to managing trial data at the oncology ward. For 2 years, my parents told me I was ruining the family. Brenda sat on her patio and labeled me selfish for requesting the repayment of a debt that was destroying my life. They expected me to internalize the blame for their own choices, but the facts tell a different story. I did not ruin them. I did not force my brother to steal a Social Security number. I did not force my father to incorporate an anonymous shell entity to launder stolen cash. I did not force my mother to finance her vintage wine collection with fraudulent funds. I did not swing a hammer at their foundation. I merely held up a mirror and allowed the justice system to handle the reflection. Their own entitled greed is exactly what burned their lives to the ground. They built a towering structure of debt and deceit, resting the entire weight of it on the back of a scapegoat. They assumed the scapegoat would never move. They were wrong. When you build a house on someone else's back, you cannot act surprised when the roof collapses the exact moment they decide to stand up and walk away. The storm they created has finally passed, leaving a clean, empty space in its wake. The legal battles are concluded. The prison sentences are underway. The fraudulent debt is satisfied. For the first time in 34 years, I am no longer defined by my utility to the Porter family. I am standing at the beginning of a quiet, uninterrupted life, waiting to see what happens when I only have to build for myself. The process of rebuilding a financial identity is remarkably fast when you hold a federal conviction in your hands. For 2 years, I carried the weight of an $85,000 commercial default on my shoulders. It dictated where I lived, how I commuted, and how I slept. But the moment the judge struck the gavel in the federal courthouse, that burden legally ceased to belong to me. I do not hire a lawyer to fix my credit. I handle the paperwork myself. I request official copies of the federal sentencing documents, the asset forfeiture orders, and the restitution mandates. I draft precise cover letters to the 3 major national credit bureaus. I attach the certified court records, proving that the debt was originated through felony identity theft and wire fraud. By statute, the bureaus are required to investigate and resolve fraud claims backed by federal convictions within 30 days. I do not have to wait the full 30 days. 2 weeks after I mail the packets, a notification illuminates my phone screen. It is an alert from my banking application indicating a significant change to my credit profile. I sit at the small table in my cramped Oakland apartment and log into the portal. I navigate to the dashboard. The bold black number that once read 480 is gone. The severe delinquency flag is erased. The account associated with the commercial lender is completely expunged from my history as if it never existed. In its place is a new number reflecting my actual payment history, my actual fiscal responsibility, and my actual life, 780. 700s. I stare at the screen for a very long time. The feeling in my chest is not jubilation. It is a profound, quiet relief. It feels like setting down a heavy physical weight after carrying it uphill for miles. The first thing I do with my restored identity is address my transportation. I take the bus to a reputable dealership in the East Bay. I do not walk onto the lot looking for the cheapest option to patch together my failing commute. I walk into the showroom and negotiate the purchase of a brand new hybrid sedan. When the finance manager runs my credit application, he does not offer me a look of pity. He offers me the lowest prime interest rate available. I sign the purchase agreement with my own name, knowing the signature belongs entirely to me. I drive off the lot in a silent, reliable vehicle. The broken transmission of the past is left behind in a scrapyard. The restoration of my credit is just the baseline. The real transformation happens in my professional life. For 2 years, my mental bandwidth was consumed by the background radiation of familial sabotage. I spent my days coordinating complex oncology trials, while my subconscious was constantly calculating how to survive the next collection call. With that psychological drain permanently removed, my capacity expands exponentially. A senior director position opens within the hospital research network. It involves overseeing a massive Phase 3 international clinical trial for a new targeted therapy. It is a role requiring intense logistical precision and absolute authority. A year ago, I would have doubted my qualifications. I would have let the imposter syndrome my family installed in me dictate my choices, but a woman who successfully orchestrated the dismantling of a multi-state corporate fraud ring does not lack authority. I apply for the promotion. I walk into the interview panel and present a flawless strategic plan for the trial rollout. When they offer me the position, I do not accept their initial compensation package. I channel the cold, analytical negotiation tactics I learned during my investigation. I secure a salary that is double my previous income. I move into a corner office with a window overlooking the city. I am no longer just a coordinator. I am the director. With my new income and my pristine credit, I decided it's time to leave the cramped studio apartment. I say goodbye to my young roommate Chloe and begin searching for a permanent sanctuary. I do not look in the Napa Valley. I have no desire to live among manicured vineyards and country clubs built on pretense. I focus my search on the East Bay Hills. I want elevation. I want a view of the water. I want a space that feels earned. I find a charming two-bedroom house tucked into a quiet, wooded neighborhood. It has hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, and a wide wooden deck facing west toward the San Francisco Bay. The property is modest compared to the sprawling estate my parents lost, but it possesses something their house never had. It has a clean foundation. I close on the house in early spring. Sitting in the title office signing the thick stack of mortgage documents is a surreal experience. I read every single page before applying my ink. I know exactly what I am promising to pay. I know exactly who holds the deed. There are no hidden limited liability companies. There are no forged notary stamps. There is only my name securing my future. The transition into my new home marks the final severance from my past. I unpack my boxes and arrange my life exactly the way I want it. I set up a dedicated home office in the second bedroom, outfitting it with dual monitors and a heavy oak desk to manage my international trial logistics. I place a comfortable reading chair by the living room window. I do not dedicate a single picture frame to the people who used me. My walls remain free of ghosts. It is a beautiful, clear California morning. The sun is just beginning to rise, burning off the low-hanging marine layer over the bay. I wake up in a quiet house. There is no looming threat of foreclosure. There are no frantic text messages demanding emergency funds. There is only the sound of the wind moving through the eucalyptus trees outside my bedroom window. I walk into my kitchen and brew a pot of dark roast coffee. I pour the steaming liquid into a ceramic mug and slide open the glass door leading to the back deck. The air is crisp and cool. I step outside and lean against the wooden railing. From this vantage point, I can see the entire expanse of the water. I can see the bridges connecting the different parts of the region. I look lighter. I feel freer. The invisible tether that kept me bound to the Porter family hierarchy has been severed cleanly, leaving no frayed edges. I take a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I look through the glass door into my home office, where my workstation is ready for the day. I built this reality single-handedly. People ask me sometimes if I miss my family. They assume that drawing a boundary of this magnitude must leave a permanent hollow ache in your chest. They assume you mourn the loss of your parents and your brother on holidays and birthdays. The truth is, you cannot miss an illusion. I do not miss the people who sat around that mahogany dining table because those people never really existed. They were performers executing a script designed to protect their own comfort. They did not want a daughter. They did not want a sister. They wanted a human shield. They wanted a shock absorber to take the impact of their failures so they could continue living in a fantasy. You cannot grieve the loss of a love you never actually possessed. I mourn the childhood I deserved, but I do not miss the people who denied it to me. I look out over the bay, watching the morning light catch the surface of the water. I think about the mother who poured a glass of wine and told me I was being selfish. I think about the father who drafted a fake promissory note to trap me in his debt. I think about the brother who stole my name because he was too lazy to build his own. If someone tells you to let a mistake go, make sure you know exactly who is paying for it. For 32 years, my family expected me to pay the price for every mistake they made. They expected me to absorb the cost of their arrogance in silence. But silence is only a virtue when it brings you peace. When silence brings you ruin, it is time to start speaking on the record. I take one final sip of my coffee, enjoying the quiet morning on my own property. The air is clear and the future is entirely my own, because the only thing I let go of was them. The fog rolling off the San Francisco Bay moves in slow gray sheets, catching the morning light before it burns away. I stand on the wooden deck of my East Bay home, the warmth of a ceramic coffee mug seeping into my palms. It has been 3 years since the gavel fell in that federal courtroom. 3 years since the property in Napa was seized, and 3 years since my former family was assigned their Department of Corrections identification numbers. People often ask me how I survived the wreckage of my own bloodline. The answer is unromantic. I stopped trying to salvage a sinking ship and learned how to build my own lifeboat. Looking back at the quiet studio apartment where I assembled that black binder, I carry 5 distinct truths with me into this new life. First blood is a biological fact, not a binding contract for loyalty. My parents demanded my allegiance while secretly spending my financial future to maintain a country club facade. They wielded the word family as a weapon to demand my compliance. I learned that true family is defined by actions by who stands with you when your car dies in the freezing rain, not by who shares your last name. Second, silence is not peace. It is a profound vulnerability. For 3 decades, I swallowed my anger to avoid disrupting the aesthetic of mahogany dining tables. I kept my mouth shut, hoping my compliance would earn their love. I learned the hard way that when you stay quiet to protect a manipulator's comfort, you inevitably pay the invoice for their mistakes. Third, emotion never wins against manipulation. Facts do. When my father tried to reframe a federal crime into a minor misunderstanding on his patio, my tears would not have stopped him. My grief was useless to him. The forensic accounting stopped him. The network logs and the Delaware corporate filings stopped him. If you want to break a generational cycle of deceit, you do not wait for an apology. You gather the receipts. Fourth, boundaries are not an act of cruelty. They are the baseline of survival. Brenda sat on the floor and called me cruel for refusing to drown alongside them. She expected me to perjure myself in a federal investigation to save her pride. Setting a boundary feels like a betrayal only to the exact people who are profiting from your lack of one. Finally, your value is not tethered to your utility. My parents only saw my worth when they needed a pristine credit score to exploit. I spent my youth believing I was the flawed, unlovable daughter. It took walking away from their estate to realize I possessed intellect, authority, and worth that had nothing to do with being their human shield. I took that intrinsic worth, secured a directorship, and bought a house with a clean foundation. I take a slow sip of my coffee. The sun finally breaks through the marine layer, casting a sharp golden light across the water. The air up here in the hills is thin, cold, and incredibly clean. I do not look back at the wine country. The people who lived there burned their own world to the ground, and I simply refuse to stand in the flames. If this journey resonated with you, if you are currently sitting at a table with people who demand your silence while they spend your future, know that you hold the power to stand up and walk away. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments below. This is Hazel Tells Stories, reminding you that the most important story you will ever write is the one where you finally choose yourself.